You're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek, where we discuss the hidden layers and deeper meanings found in all the Star Trek TV series, movies, and more. And today we're discussing the Next Generation episode, Ship in a Bottle. I'm Don Bettinelli, and joining me today on the panel are Father Cory Sticha. Hey, Father Cory.
It's different than Message in a Bottle? Oh, wait, that's a
Yes.
Sting song. That's a police song.
Or Ship of Fools, which my mind kept wanting to say. And Jimmy Akin. Hey, Jimmy.
Howdy, Don.
Folks, remember to like The Secrets of Star Trek on our Facebook page at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia. Retweet us on Twitter, where we're at SQPN, and leave us comments wherever you find us. We love to hear from you. I want to tell you about another StarQuest show you are sure to enjoy called The Secrets of Middle Earth. You can find that wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/Middle Earth. So this is The Ship of Fools, a 6-season episode. And Jimmy, can you give us a recap of what happens?
This week, Data and Geordi are playing Sherlock Holmes when they notice the holodeck is malfunctioning. They shut it down and summon Lieutenant Barclay to fix it. As he's doing so, Barclay activates the Moriarty program, a sentient program originally created 4 years ago to outthink Data and who wants to leave the holodeck. Moriarty is angry and thinks that Captain Picard has not done anything to get him off the holodeck in the last 4 years. So Barclay arranges a meeting on the holodeck between himself, Moriarty, Captain Picard, and Data. Picard insists that there is no way for Moriarty to leave the holodeck, but Moriarty is not convinced, given his difference from other holodeck creations. In an amazing display of mind over matter, he simply walks off the holodeck. He forswears his criminal past and just wants to explore the universe. But he wants a companion and creates a suitable, equally intelligent, equally self-aware consort for himself, Countess Regina Bartholomew. He insists that Picard find a way to get her off the holodeck, as he's unwilling to take the risk of letting her just walk off. To give Picard a deadline, he takes control of the ship, which is dangerously near a new star that's about to form from two gas giants. The gang gets the idea of using the pattern enhancers to try to beam an object off the holodeck, but their first attempt doesn't work. Then, Data deduces that Moriarty is tricking them. Unbeknownst to them, they are still on the holodeck and out of communication with the rest of the crew. And in an attempt to get control of the fictional ship back, Picard gave his command codes to the computer. Moriarty now uses these to seize control of the real Enterprise and keep it dangerously near the new star. Picard comes to the Countess and gives her a technobabble explanation of how they've learned that it is possible to beam someone off the holodeck by teching the tech. Moriarty learns this from her and calls the real Riker and tells him to implement the plan. After they've beamed off the holodeck, he demands a shuttle so that he and the Countess can explore the universe. Once they're on their way, he releases control of the Enterprise. Then Picard shuts down the program, and it's revealed that Picard turned Moriarty's own plan back on him by doing his own holodeck within a holodeck routine. He's now trapped Moriarty in a simulation with enough memory to let him and the Countess live out their lives, thinking they're exploring the universe. In a briefing to the crew afterwards, Picard gives us a meta ending by saying, "Who knows? All of this could just be a simulation running on a device on someone's table." Mm-hmm. At which point Barclay, after being left alone, gives us a double meta ending by saying, "Computer, end program." At which point we see the birth of the new star and the program ends. The end.
Wow, we have like layers on layers. It's turtles all the way down.
I was thinking virtual machine and a virtual machine. If you've done computer work, you know what that's all about.
Yep. So one of the things I was remarking about was the difference between, we've been doing a lot of first season TNG, and we did some third season stuff too, but the contrast between first season and sixth season, just especially in the characters, like and especially Picard and Data. This Picard is so much less shouty. So, and Data is so much more subtle, and the actors have really refined these characters, and the writers, frankly, too, to be the ones that we remember and recall.
Also, the guest characters are way better than guest characters in the early seasons. Moriarty and Countess Bartholomew are both really well-written characters.
Yes.
And they're very attractive characters. They're very compelling, and the actors playing them give great performances.
Yes, they do.
Well, and even some of the effects. Now, we don't see a lot of it in this one, but even, the effects, the costuming, the set, they went a lot more, they improved a lot in the 5 years. I mean, the uniforms look so much better and everything,
Right. It's fun kind of jumping from one era of the show to another to see how things have improved more so than many other shows. I'm thinking like Stargate or DS9 or like a lot of other shows that have had this long span do not show that much improvement. I mean, they always show some improvement, but this is a very big contrast, right? At least to me.
Which only goes to underscore how sucky the original 2 series of this show were.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the first 2 seasons. Yeah. So this is, as we've said, is a sequel to the season 2 episode, The Elementary Dear Data. And the reason we're doing it now is because Star Trek Picard season 3, which starts next week, as you're listening to this, perhaps, is going to include Moriarty in some way, the character. So we're discussing that character, but it's a sequel to that season, and they apparently had wanted to do more Sherlock Holmes stories featuring Data, but they had a licensing dispute with the Arthur Conan Doyle estate.
Yeah, blah blah blah. They wouldn't. They wouldn't now, because as of this year, all of the Sherlock Holmes stories are public domain. Have at it.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize they weren't, actually.
Are they all public domain now?
They all are. Yes. Okay. Every one of them. That was the thing. Now, of course, this was made back in, around 1990, and that was 30-something years ago. And so they weren't all out of public domain then. But they progressively started to enter public domain, and as of this year, they now all are public domain.
Interesting.
By the way, speaking of when this was aired, as we're recording this, it's almost exactly 30 years to the day.
Yeah.
So it was we're 2 days off.
Yeah, we're a couple of days off from the exact anniversary, right? 30 years. Yeah, that's kind of wild. So, the other thing I want to difference is the Barclay character wasn't on the Enterprise during Elementary Dear Data, and so they use him to kind of he's got this connection to the holodeck that we've established, this holodeck addiction in a previous episode, and that sort of thing. But it allows him to kind of be an audience surrogate for those who weren't around for the second season. So that
he's the exposition dump. Everything needs to be explained to him because he wasn't there for the first appearance of Moriarty.
So is Moriarty the first self-aware hologram, the precursor to the Doctor on Voyager and the Holo Janeway and Prodigy?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I wonder in universe whether that would be...
They didn't have the holodeck before TNG, and Moriarty was created in season 2 of TNG.
Yeah,
there weren't a lot of holodeck stories, and what they were gee whiz, this is so amazing, and they weren't really making self-aware holodeck characters at that point. In fact, Loxana Troy was turned on by how unself-aware they were.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting because I'm just thinking about that in Universal, whether the Moriarty inspired the creation of the EMH and that sort of thing. I'm kind of curious about that.
No, they did have the female that Riker was attracted to in the Minar episode. That
True,
was
right?
Fairly close.
Close.
She was designed to be somewhat self-aware so that he could be trapped in the holodeck.
Was that Minuet?
Minuet,
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And today, the solution to this episode is, you want off the holodeck? Let's slap a holotransmitter on your arm, a mobile emitter on your arm.
Or put up emitters throughout the ship, like we do in other series.
Yes, exactly. You could have equipped the shuttle with emitters and that sort of thing. Yeah. So the question is did Picard break a promise to Moriarty? Did he shut him off and just ignore him?
No, they address that. It's understandable from Moriarty's perspective. He thinks that's what happened, but Picard says, we tried to study how you became self-aware and we weren't able to figure it out. And we also consulted with people at Federation HQ about how, we asked our scientists and technicians to find a way to bring you off, and they haven't been able to do it thus far.
Okay. I mean, my guess is they probably didn't try too hard.
I'm guessing that too.
He's just a holiday character stored away now in a file. The other big question for me was why? Well, it's the usual Star Trek techno question: is when the technology goes wrong, why don't you pull the plug? Like, just turn off the holodeck. Just like, there's got to be a place where the power is going in. Turn off the power.
No master circuit breaker down in engineering for the holodecks.
Yeah.
Apparently not. They do kind of address that question, because at one point Worf is taking a security team to, or no, I'm getting it confused with a different Barclay episode that I was watching last night. But they were trying to go to the holodeck and deactivate stuff, and it was surrounded by force fields, and they were having to make their way through the force fields first.
They did do that in this one, but of course that was after Moriarty had gotten the command codes and got control of the ship. Yep. So that was in this one too. So the other holodeck problem that they often do is like, oh, if he steps off the holodeck, he will cease to exist. And it's the usual Star Trek computer problem, which is holodeck programs are just programs. They'll restart, just reboot it.
Yeah, I know. It's like, why are you making it sound like he's going to die? If he steps off, he'll just, his body will derez, and then he can just reboot.
Right. Exactly. So the drama, they want the drama. So Picard does point out to Moriarty that crime is still unacceptable, and Moriarty says, "Oh, I'm no longer a character in a novel. That was a fiction written for me 4 centuries ago. Now I'm independent." But yet he's still kind of a
he's
criminal.
Not bad. He's just drawn that way.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jessica Rabbit.
And yet he's being a con artist as he's saying that, because they don't realize that they're on the holodeck created or inside a program that he created.
Yeah, so he's still Moriarty, but at heart, he's still the character. And in fact, he says, I thought that was kind of interesting. I was created, I'll paraphrase, I was created when someone gave a text prompt to an AI to create an opponent that could outthink Data.
Yeah.
Huh, I wonder if I could do that with chatbot GPT. Create a character that could outthink Data from Star Trek Next Generation. So that was kind of
funny. I can't do that, Dave.
I'm hoping they open that up again to the public, because I didn't get in on the first wave, and now I have to listen to all these people and what they're doing with it, and it's I like to experiment with it.
It's occasionally, I actually have a login, and occasionally though, even then it's hard to get in because it's so busy. But yeah, I hope so.
Good.
So so he wants to create a companion. He challenges Picard's ethics. They go to the 10 forward so we can show him, what's out there. And he challenges Picard's ethics. He says, is it morally and ethically acceptable to deny the woman I love so that you can put your conscience at ease? Are you saying that you will simply dictate how I am to live my life? And so there's this interesting back and forth where he wants to, live his life, and Picard's saying, no, you can't.
It is interesting that he, makes this point, and it's this kind of standard rights debate that we get on Star Trek about artificial life forms.
Right. But Data's still a toaster.
Data's still a toaster.
He's still a toaster. Moriarty's still a bunch of photons in a force field. And
yeah.
Moriarty's
Data's still a toaster. Moriarty's still a video game.
There you go.
And I still go back to this point where, like, when he walks off the holodeck, why Picard and Data didn't immediately go, this is fake, because there are no emitters out there. What is he? He has force fields.
So, the argument he makes is that I, unlike the normal creations of the holodeck, am self-aware. I have a mind, and that changes things. So I'm going to exercise mind over matter and use my mind to stabilize my material form as I leave. And then presumably that happens largely subconsciously from his perspective. But essentially the claim is I'm able to do things for myself that a normal holodeck object is incapable of doing.
Right.
And I suppose they've seen so many amazing things out in space that it was imaginable that some mental projection could create a body.
And of
Right.
course,
And
he uses the argument of Descartes, I think, therefore I am, cogito ergo sum.
Yeah.
So that I can think myself basically into reality. You never mind, in this episode we see him throw a book through the door and it vanishes, or in Elementary Dear Data, if I remember right, there were a couple of characters who had accidentally walked off the holodeck and of course just vanish.
Right.
Yeah, there's that's the big goodbye. Cyrus Redblock walks off and disintegrates.
Right.
But in it is it while it would be reasonable for them to question the reality of this, I understand. I don't have a problem with them not cottoning on at this point because they do see impossible stuff, 12 times before breakfast on this show. And if it was always, but that's impossible, it would get really old really fast. So I can appreciate their openness to, we have no explanation for this, but something has apparently just happened that stretches our conception of what's possible.
Yeah. And Picard even calls it a miracle. This is an absolute miracle from our perspective. We don't understand it. We don't know how it happened, but it did.
Right.
And
Apparently.
and this goes to the subtlety of Moriarty's current plan. So in the original episode, he kept Dr. Catherine Pulaski hostage, and eventually they talked him out of it and was like, well, look, we'll work to find a way to get you out of here. Please let her go. And he did. And he even alludes to that here. Without naming Dr. Pulaski, he says that he had released his hostage and Picard had made this promise. This is essentially that plot squared from Moriarty's perspective, because now he's holding multiple hostages, including the entire ship. And you look at his plan, and he's sort of got three major steps. Well, you can count it as four. Step one, get Picard into the holodeck. So that's why he says, I think because he can't leave. So this seems like a reasonable request, although they could talk to him over the intercom.
Right.
But it seems like a reasonable request to bring him down here and we'll talk at Baker Street. And so that gets the first main hostage into the trap. Then step two, I'm going to apparently walk off the holodeck to convince them that this is possible, because he needs them to believe it's possible if they're going to really work at making it happen. So his walking off the holodeck is what's known in magic as a prover. It's meant to convince them that this is actually in magic the term is a little bit different, but basically it's functioning to show them this really is possible. Now you just have to figure out how to do it. But now he's got to motivate them to actually do it. And since he's fine, because he can now apparently walk around wherever he wants, he needs someone else that doesn't apply to. So stage three is, let's bring in the Countess. And yes, you're so right. It's what I did was very risky, and we couldn't count on it happening again. And therefore, we need you to find a way to make this really happen safely. And that motivates them to start trying to figure out how to bring the Countess off, which he really wants to use for himself because he's never really escaped. And then he creates the crisis in the imaginary holodeck Enterprise, where he starts rerouting command codes so that Picard will be forced to give his own command code to the computer to undo it, and then he can expand his pool of hostages to the entire ship. And so this is really a very carefully thought out con.
You think about it, he fished Picard to give up his password.
Basically.
Well, and he creates the Countess because she's a sympathetic character. She's almost designed perfectly to play on Picard's sympathies.
She was actually created for him, he said.
Yeah.
Not the other way around.
No, but I mean, he brought her out as Moriarty himself is not enough of a sympathetic character for Picard to save. So bringing out the Countess.
Damsel in distress.
Exactly. It's a perfect for Picard.
But she was created initially for him, and then he gave her self-awareness.
Sentience. Yeah.
Right. No, I get that. But she's plays a perfect role in the con as well. Yeah.
Which raises the question of how, just how much is she merely part of the con? A totally cynical reading on Moriarty would say he doesn't care for her at all.
Yeah.
He just brought her up as a foil to get Picard to start working on the actual problem. But I suspect that's not true. I suspect he really does care for her. He's probably playing that up a little bit, but I think he really does care for her because she was created to be the woman of his dreams. So, I think she is.
Yeah.
She's also just hot, and I am a big Countess Bartholomew fan, so I will admit that.
Well, what's funny is she was played by
I would travel the galaxy with her too.
Yeah. She was played by Stephanie Beacham, who's best known for Dynasty, soap opera Dynasty at this time.
That's right. Yeah, in fact, I think I saw in the notes that she was chosen because she could look good in Victorian gear, Victorian gab. So when the way that they figure out, the data figures out that they're still in the holodeck is Geordi's left-handed on engineering or something. Like
that's part of it, yeah.
Yeah. And then he takes his comm badge and kind of tosses it, and it hits the wall of the holodeck. And I'm like, wait a minute. Usually the holodeck compensates, right? It would show it flying off. That's the whole part of the illusion.
No, they established that all the way back in Encounter at Farpoint. You can hit it. The holodeck adjusts for the characters, but you can throw objects at the wall and it won't be able to compensate fast enough.
Oh, okay. So
it's not like the golf simulators where you swing and hit the screen and then you see the ball go through the screen. Yeah,
that's right. It's one of the I saw online that there are clues throughout the episode for an attentive viewer, apparently, that it's not what's usual going on, which is one of the things is there is almost always a lot more exterior shots in between scenes and acts, and then we don't get those in this. And so in this episode, there's an abnormally long break between exterior shots of the Enterprise, with none appearing between the moment Picard, Data, and Barclay enter the holodeck and the moment just before Moriarty contacts the bridge after seizing control of the ship.
That apparently happens in other episodes where we're trapped in fictional stories too. So I guess you could be on the lookout for that if you want. I do like how when Picard asks Data, how did you figure out that we're still in the holodeck? Data says, through deduction, which is a nice thing because it's all about Data. I mean, the root of the story is Data playing Sherlock Holmes.
Right.
And so it's nice to have him use deduction to figure this out.
To defeat Moriarty, essentially. And the way that Picard defeats Moriarty is to make him think he's the more clever and brilliant one. Oh, yes, Moriarty, you tricked us. It's, you've defeated us through your brilliance. And in fact, Picard ends up turning tables on him, creates a simulation within the simulation.
So within Picard's plan, it's also very nicely constructed. And this is one of the differences between season 6 and season 1 writing. They seriously thought this stuff through. So step 1 of Picard's plan is, which we don't see, is go create another holodeck within a holodeck that will contain a transporter room and a shuttle room and the route between them, and that I can transfer him into this other holodeck. And step 2, go to the Countess and explain the plan to the Countess, not to Moriarty directly, because, and now he has a fake justification for this, because the Countess is like, why are you coming to me with this? Why don't you just talk to James? And he's like, because I think you're a reasonable person who I can talk to and will compromise. And so I want you to convince him to this plan. We found out, and here he has this nonsense explanation of, we need to decouple the Heisenberg compensators and allow them to rescramble randomly, and that will allow stable matter to come out of the transporter. So that's his technobabble explanation. But the that's part of the con. You know, this technique doesn't really exist. We really have no clue it'll work, but it sounds good. And neither she nor Moriarty are experts in transporters, so it'll sound good to them. And then, because he didn't approach Moriarty himself, now, if he had approached Moriarty himself, he would have said, so let's do it.
Right.
And that would have not been as convincing to Moriarty as if Moriarty went to Riker and got Riker to do it.
Right.
Because he would suspect a trick from Picard, but he thinks he's talking to the real Riker. Also, Picard is in the Picard can't really approach Moriarty directly and say, so let's do this, because he believes Picard doesn't know he's still in the holodeck.
Right.
So Moriarty needs someone on the outside to do this. And by not coming to Moriarty and proposing it himself, Moriarty can continue to believe that Picard thinks he's on the real Enterprise. So that's why Picard very cleverly goes to the Countess and lets the Countess give him the information, so Picard doesn't have to propose, so let's do it now. And then Moriarty can go to who he thinks is the real Riker and get the real Riker to do it. But really, just like Moriarty looped their comm system into the holodeck, now Picard has done that too, so he's really talking to Holo Riker. Holo Riker then beams the two of them into the second holodeck within a holodeck, and they think they're in the real world transporter room, they think they're getting into a real world shuttlecraft, and they leave.
Yep.
Right. It's really good writing in this one. I mean, it's the layering of the plot like that is pretty good.
And of course, what tricks Moriarty is he did actually at one point talk to the real Riker. When he took control of the ship, he was talking to real Riker, but then of course Picard subverted that. As you said.
Yeah. Rerouted the communications. Yeah. So, and now the Moriarty and the Countess are living in basically a independent firewalled computer
air
simulation.
gapped.
Air gap. That's what I was trying to think of. Computer simulation of the galaxy, or at least the Alpha Quadrant, which is kind of an interesting concept that they talked about how it's got enough memory that they can continue to travel for years and years without, realizing, which raises an interesting question of how does this then now interact with Picard season 3?
Well, they may. So I see basically two options. They may come up with a new instantiation of Moriarty, who's not this same one. I mean, they can certainly do that. It's less organic than if they bring back this instantiation. But if they bring back this instantiation, I'm betting we're going to get, you tricked me and now my girlfriend is dead or derezzed and I'm vengeful now. So bah on you.
Somehow lore is involved in bringing him back or something like that too, I would think. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, maybe, he ends up in this device that Barclay is given custody of. And, 2 years after this, the Enterprise crashes on that planet. So maybe someone scavenges the device.
That's true. That's
scavenges.
True. That's lore again could possibly be behind it. Lore's like the Master in Doctor Who. He just keeps showing up no matter how many times we think he's dead. All right. And then we talked about how at the very end we have Picard's meta thing and Barclay's last end program to make sure he's not still on a holiday. Frankly, I'd be doing that all the time. I'd be walking around the Enterprise going, "Anybody around? End program." Okay. Whew.
Yeah.
So, any other thoughts on this episode, Father Cory?
Nothing here.
Jimmy?
So we didn't really talk about it, but the initial scene in this is also nicely done. It's Data and Geordi are playing Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson. They're in the Baker Street sitting room. And the way they begin to realize something is wrong with the holodeck is Data is doing this elaborate deduction about the murderer he's looking for there's some guy who's died, and he's got his brother in the sitting room, and he's building up to the fact the brother is the murderer. And the way he knows this is that the killer was left-handed, and he tosses an object to the brother, who catches it with his right hand, and Data just keeps rambling about his deduction, and he's building up to, so you're the murderer, and Geordi at one point just says, Data, it's in his right hand. and this was nice because it's just this visual thing.
Yeah.
You know, they don't immediately point out he's caught it with his right hand. They let Data unspool without noticing that it's in his right hand, and then Geordi just points it out. And at that point, the murder brother is like, Scotland Yard's finest, and is walking off. and they then call in Barclay and tell him something's wrong with the holodeck. And they later play with the right-handed, left-handed thing in the episode in a kind of an inconsistent way, but they have it as a sort of leitmotif through the rest of the episode, because it's going to come back when Geordi is acting left-handed when really he's right-handed. So that is a continuing issue that Barclay didn't fix because they got diverted by Moriarty. Also, in that initial scene, Brent Spiner, you know, he's playing Sherlock Holmes, so he's smoking a pipe, and he's doing this thing that he does where he's using the pipe to click in his teeth, like, and he does this regularly. He has this kind of dramatic gesture of just, and it's like, okay, that's not how most pipe smokers actually do it. I mean, I did meet a guy once who seemed to have this nervous habit of just clicking with his teeth. But that's not how most pipe smokers do it, so it's just a little weird.
Well, I thought it was that'd be just Data doing the motion, but not really understanding it. I think is what they were showing there, you know.
I presume the left-handed, right-handed mix-up was Moriarty in the program, already influencing it.
I mean, it could be, but they don't play it that way. They tell us that Moriarty has been conscious intermittently during the last 4 years, that something was going on, and they didn't know that was going to happen. They didn't think he was going to be tortured in this disembodied, aware but unable to do anything state. I also wondered, could this have been Moriarty? But they don't really give us any clues that it was. In fact, when Barclay first activates him, it's as part of a diagnostic. And I mean, he says, search for any anomalous strings of code. Well, okay, Moriarty is going to turn up in that search. And then he has to activate the protected memory to turn Moriarty on. And he does a test with Moriarty. As he's talking to him, he tosses an object to him. Moriarty catches it, and he uses it as a handedness test. And then when Moriarty realizes this was just a test, he throws it away, and no more is said about it.
Well, they explain it was like some relay or transceiver or something, you know, something went faulty in the holodeck, and that's why he was doing it. And that's what Barclay was there to fix.
And so this was just opportunism on the part of Moriarty as opposed to a plan, you know, getting fulfilled. Okay. I can see it go either way, but yeah, I can see that. All right. So that should do it for this time, I guess. We want to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Star Trek, including Raymond K., Christian A., Jeremy N., Ben B., and Brad W. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Star Trek and all the shows at StarQuest. And you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. We'd also like to thank Victor Lambs, who edited this episode for us. So what did you think of Ship in a Bottle, this TNG 6th season episode? You can let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com/trek, our Facebook page at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, send an email to trek@sqpn.com, or visit our StarQuest Discord community at sqpn.com/Discord. You can now watch The Secrets of Star Trek in full video on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/StarQuest Media, where you should also make sure to hit the bell to get notifications. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the season premiere of Picard Season 3. Until then, Father Cory Sticha, thank you for joining me and sharing the secrets of Star Trek.
Well, thank you, Dom.
Jimmy Akin, thank you as well.
Thank you. Live long and prosper. And now I'm going to uncouple the Heisenberg compensators and allow them to re-scramble randomly.
Oh, very good. I always enjoy a good re-scrambling at the end of an episode. And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Star Trek on StarQuest and end program.